Hello and welcome to the gameplay video gameplay video with commentary by Thomas Whiteleg, lead designer of Hordible. I've pre-recorded this footage just so we can pause and kind of point out anything in the design as we go through this. And yeah, when we get started. Oh, I won't be speaking too much about the UI during this playthrough, as that was not something I specialized in, and I believe that's best spoken by the lead UI designer. However, I must say this environment spin shot that we implemented, and I will kind of scroll back to the start of this video. I was the one who pointed out, hey, we should probably try and get the player to feel like, yes, this is an environment I want to be playing and feel enticed by it, which is why I wanted to show it off as one of the first things. We were really proud of the environment. And so I created a camera and created a crane, which was the crane was in the middle of the environment, and the camera was attached to it in the stands, and we just spanned that crane round to create a seamless environment spin shot. Anyway, so I'm going to actually turn down the volume of this as the music can be kind of loud. This starting animation was also created by me. It was my first time actually using character blueprints in my sequence of shots. So it's quite... Oh, I'll turn it down one more time. So it was a new skill, but I was very happy to give it a try. Now, as for the starting wave, I will pause here for a second. We hard-coded the starting wave to be only 3 melee enemies. And the reason we did that is because all the other waves can start showing off our special type enemies, but we want to give the player a starting place of, hey, this is, just have that first wave to kind of get used to the controls without there being too much of a threat and without there being too much out of the ordinary. So if I do continue, you'll start to see one of our first special enemies. Oh no, this is first wave, my mistake. Just get us out of the way. We decided on an assault rifle for the first weapon just because of how much gamers will recognize a sort of assault rifle. Well, there is our first special enemy type, the smaller blob. He is faster, but packs less of a punch. A common enemy archetype. And our second one there was a Blobelisk. He doesn't actually do much in the way of damage, but instead he debuffs the player so they are slower. It's less important in the earlier waves, but we do introduce him in those earlier waves so the player knows what he does. I'm pretty sure he spawns every 2 to 3 waves. Those bigger guys are the Bloblins. They have the archetype, they're bigger, they're stronger, but they're slower, and when they are killed, they actually explode into multiple smaller enemies. That just added more of a challenge and kind of took it away from just being the, heavy but slow archetype, which players will be very used to at this point if they are big fans of horde shooters. Now this is the first god weapon that we introduced in the game, our grenade launcher. We show it off this early in the game just because we know that already the hordes are going to start building up. They're going to, enemies are going to start being, going to be in flux. And so we want the player to feel like they can kind of start leaving dents. They can start carving through these giant groups of enemies. And the best way to do that, the best tool to give them, is that sort of ranged area of effect attack. Now, as for the melee attack, we didn't want our melee attack to be something like a knife or something that can carve through enemies but has a very low range, simply because we didn't think it'd be that practical in our game. Instead, what we decided to do was go for a less damage, but has that knockback, as it's pushing enemies away when they get too close, can really be effective when swarmed by a horde. It's going to be more practical for the players, and that means they'll enjoy it more. Now, there are some slight collision issues with our game, as you saw there. as you saw a little bit ago, giant enemies had a bit of trouble climbing up the pillars. It's unfortunate, and if we were to work on this game further, we would try and fix the scale of those pillars. However, smaller enemies can usually get by them and chase the player up anyway, so it isn't too much of an issue. What is a slightly bigger issue is, as you can see there, a enemy has gotten into the stance, as we weren't able to implement a barrier in time. And as you can see now during this recording, I'm going to have a slight bit of trouble finding him. And so I'll take this time to just say that whenever an enemy does get into the stands, the player has the tools, he has those guns to be able to shoot them and kill them so the game can continue. So this isn't a game-breaking bug at all. It's a slight inconvenience made by the time limitations of a game jam. Now, as all those sound recordings were recorded by different members of the team, we actually hired out a sound studio here at the university so we could get the cleanest audio possible. And here is our second god weapon, the Hades pistol. Now, we had a bit of trouble at first actually getting the players to use the pistol, as most FPS gamers view it as a starter weapon. And so we were interested, hey, how do we get players, how do we get these, gamers to recognize there's something they want to use in the arsenal along with all the other weapons? And what we decided on was using a lifesteal, as in this, it's halfway through the game now, health pickups don't spawn all the time, and so they'll usually be down to about half health. And so with the Hades pistol having that sort of life drain, giving the player, HP, it makes it much more useful and makes the player use it even in the final waves of the game, gives it that utility. Ooh, there we go. That you just saw there, the effects of the Blobelisk making the player noticeably slower. Oh, and that is another one of our special enemies, the Spitter. They're a ranged enemy, kind of like the Blobelisk, but they actually do damage. The Spitter has an effect where he'll be running away from the player when they get a certain range. And so the most effective weapons against them is a grenade launcher to kind of keep that distance. Go. Now you may notice that the character control is slightly more floaty and cartoonish than most FPSs, especially in the sort of horde genre. And the reason we decided to do this is because of a multitude of things. The first being that, well, it's a more open map. The player has more room to be running around in than the corridors and kind of more strict areas in other horde games like COD Zombies or can't think of any others in the moment. But what we decided was, if we're going to have a more open area, we'll go for a more Doom-like movement system where the player has more control, they have higher jumps, faster running, to kind of weave around enemies. And I believe that not only fits the kind of tone of the game, being more cartoonish with the low poly art style. There we go. But it also makes the player feel better, makes them feel more powerful, which it's a placebo effect sort of thing, which helps with the difficulty. Because when the player feels like they have more control over the character, they feel like they have more control over the situation. That is, as he has spawned in the other two rooms as well, that is our Blobcade. His original concept was simply to spawn randomly in any sort of hallway, and there are a lot of hallways in the Zeus room, so he'd spawn quite a bit. However, we found issues with scaling, and so we decided to simply make him spawn in the doorways to kind of, you know, act as an extra challenge which you need to defeat before you can go back into the main Colosseum area. And as you saw there, the newest weapon is Zeus's shotgun, which has a chance to paralyze enemies, kind of giving the player a bit of breathing space and, you know, being able to kill the enemy while they're paralyzed. Now, as for pickups, as we've ran to a few of those during this gameplay, right now the player has the ×2 to their, the ×2 to their score, which, you know, kind of explanatory, just doubles the amount of score that they get as they play. There is also the unlimited clip pickup, which makes the player have unlimited clip for a certain amount of time. The shield pickup, which makes them invulnerable for a certain amount of time. And of course the health pickup, which just gives them more health. And the reason we decided to implement a score into this game is due to the replayability factor. Our game's core principle is that it's an infinite game that the player can play until they decide to finish or until they die. And so to kind of play into this infinite part of the game, we decided, hey, let's give them a score which they can rack up throughout all these different waves. And, you know, higher wave they get to, the more score they get. It gives the player, you know, that incentive to replay the game and keep playing, keep getting better, racking up these kill streaks, you know, properly, you know, wanting to go back to it. You may also notice that we didn't include ammo in this game, while other Horde shooters do. And it is a similar reason to why we had the player be more floaty and, you know, faster than other games, which is the fact that we wanted the player to mainly be focusing on the Horde action. We didn't want the player to be focusing on the Horde and be focusing on finding ammo, as that would just be too much to take in at once and would stop the game from being as fun. It'd kind of take away from the cartoony, pure action of the game. And so we decided instead of having ammo, we would have clip. The player can reload, you know, have infinite ammo, but to kind of break away and stop the player from using one gun the entire time, each gun has a reload time, which they may want to switch to other weapons for. And of course, you know, principle, the stronger the gun, like this grenade launcher, the longer it takes to reload. Now this is the final room, the Apollo room, personally my favourite, and with the final gun, the Apollo crossbow. And so this crossbow has a piercing shot which can go through multiple enemies at once, although I'm pretty bad at aiming it. The crossbow was actually the gun which was not changed the most, but it was helped the most with our playtesting. As originally, we assumed that all players would know that to use a crossbow you'd have to press and hold to charge it. However, with our playtesting we found that everyone who played kind of didn't know why the crossbow wasn't shooting, as they just press it like they did all the other guns and nothing would happen as they weren't press and holding. And so what we decided to do based on that feedback was to give the crossbow some animation, where the actual bolt of the crossbow goes up and loads as they press and hold. This gives, and with the sound effects implemented as well, mind you, as you can see, there's the pulling sound effect as you press and hold, which incentivizes the player to actually press and hold, and so they know this information. Let's get another ×2 so we can rack up that score. Now, one slight issue that this game does have is the pacing with the Blobelisk. We originally intended for the Blobelisk to be able to spawn just like other enemies. However, due to issues with level design, we found that he would just clip through the ceiling of some rooms. So we decided to give him a strict spawn place, which also incentivized the player to go back into the middle of the arena and kind of check out some of the other rooms. However, it does break up the pacing, and given more time, the scale of the Blobalist would be fixed, so he can spawn just like everyone else. Now, as we are coming to the final set of waves, I can talk more about the meta elements of this game, which is the core design principle that I came onto this project knowing was that it's going to be an infinite style game. The player can play for as long as they want, fight hordes as big as they want, and either die or finish by going through a portal. And so we decide, when I came into the project, I said, hey, why don't we spawn a portal at the end of the, after a certain amount of waves, as the original idea was just the player will play until they die. But that will annoy some players as there ain't a concrete ending. Some players do want to play and they want to rack up that score and kind of beat their personal best. But other players want a concrete starting and end to a game with that sense of, finishing. And so what I decided on was, let's add a portal at at the end of, I'm pretty sure, wave 15. And so the player can, if they want to, go through the portal, get there, well done. And if they don't want to, they can continue playing for as long as they wish. And, die in combat. Now you may see in the top right corner there is a bit of an odd looking face. Now we did have a minimap designed for this game, however during the last day we weren't able to get it finished, we weren't able to get it working properly. And so we were with this big problem. Hey, what are we going to do now? We have this big space in the top right, what are we going to do with it? And we decided, hey, let's create a quick sketch, do it in kind of a low poly-esque, art style similar to everything else in the world, and put the face there as kind of a Doom-like, icon for the player. Just adds a bit more personality as the player never really gets to see themselves. If given more time, I would definitely ask a concept artist to create multiple different faces, which can, when damaged, the face will go to a look of pain or something like that. However, I do believe it's a good compromise, which adds more personality to our game. And which is one of the most important things I found. Having a goofy, sort of fun theme. The enemies aren't that serious, they're giant walking blobs. The guns are, more powerful than you'd expect with no ammo. It's all very silly, which I believe really just adds to, adds to the fun of our game. Especially since we kept it consistent throughout all our different elements. From the low poly art style to the feeling of the enemies and the character. And there's our final portal. So let's jump through. There we go. So I'll pause right there. I'm pretty sure that is everything I have to say about the Hordible game. Thank you very much for listening and have a nice day.